Thanks for logging on to MyFoxHurricane.com. Still plenty of activity across the tropics. We have Fiona, we have Gaston across the northern Atlantic, and then this area that we're all really starting to pay attention to doesn't look like much right now, but really all indications are that is going to be something that we really have to focus on as we go into next week. That is that Invest 98. So first stop is Tropical Storm Gaston working its way across the North Atlantic. We have the Azores here. This is going to just continue to do these little pirouettes and little turns across the North Atlantic, kind of cutting right through the Azores and then working its way back over open waters. And eventually, as we get into the middle part of next week, the system basically just kind of dissipates. Here is that major hurricane, or Hurricane Fiona. You can see in some of these rain bands, we have some lightning. We've seen some lightning close to the center, right in that eyeball. All signs of a very well-formed and mature hurricane, and that is exactly what you have. Really a classic-looking hurricane at this point. Top winds right now are at 130 miles an hour. It's moving to the north-northeast at 15, and it will pass safely just to the west of Bermuda. They'll see some stronger winds, but they stay out of those hurricane force winds. That's the good news right there. But then watch as we go into the weekend, we are still talking about a very powerful hurricane transitioning into an extratropical system working its way up towards Nova Scotia. Probably about the strongest storm they have seen in quite some time up in that direction. We are talking about winds 90 over 100 miles an hour in some cases. You're going to see some gusts even higher than that with what's left of Fiona as it works its way across the North Atlantic. So here we have that major hurricane, a very mature hurricane, Fiona, and then the strong winds. These act like an engine. The air comes in at the surface, it goes up, and then it exhausts it out of the top of the hurricane. So that's what you're seeing, basically that exhaust coming out of the hurricane and feeding all the way down into the Caribbean. So you see what's going on. It is creating that strong wind shear across the eastern Caribbean. That is right where that Invest 98, it is sitting right here. So it has been affected by that wind shear over the past couple of days, but you see what's going on. It's right here. It's getting right on the edge of that stronger wind shear. So that means as it continues to work its way to the west, you know what's happening? It's moving into lower wind shear into a more favorable environment. So we've got lower wind shear. We have plenty of warm water in a very moist environment. So really all the conditions are in place that this is just going to continue to develop, and all the models are on board showing a developing tropical system across the central and eventually into the western Caribbean as we head through the rest of the week, heading into the weekend. And really over the next couple of days here, we could easily be talking about a tropical depression or tropical storm into the central Caribbean. And then the question is, where is it going? Because if it moves up into the western Caribbean, you know what's next. It's working its way towards the Gulf of Mexico more than likely. So we look at the various computer models. We've got the European, we have the GFS and the Fox model all plotted on top of each other. Very good agreement in that short term of basically a developing tropical system. You can see what's going on here. As we head into Saturday, they're pretty much all stacked right on top of each other. As we continue through the weekend, you start to see that little spread in the models. Not a huge spread, but notice in red, that is the GFS a bit further to the south. And then you have the European and the Fox model, the Fox model sitting in between these various models. And notice what's going on. It's working its way to the west and maybe towards the west-northwest into the western Caribbean. Warm water, low wind shear, moisture around. No reason that this won't continue to intensify. So the question becomes, where is it going? Because we're quite likely talking about a tropical storm or a hurricane working its way into the Gulf of Mexico. And the big key to all of this will be this trough, which will be developing across the eastern U.S. How strong will this trough be? When exactly will it be moving through? And the timing of that trough compared to this developing system across the Caribbean working its way up into the Gulf of Mexico. There's just too many variables to say with any kind of certainty at this point, hey, this is going to be here and this is going to be here and they're all going to meet up. You just can't do that at this point. There's way too many variables. And remember, we're talking about a system that actually hasn't even developed yet, where this is all just in computer model land at this point. So you really have to just kind of wait and see how all this plays out over the coming days. So as we look at that long range, the European and the GFS, you kind of keep that in the back of your mind. We're talking about computer model land, and there's too many variables. So could something like this, where the European puts it into the Eastern Gulf, happen? Sure, it could. Could something like this happen where the GFS puts it further into the Western or the Central Gulf of Mexico? Absolutely, that could happen as well. Any of these solutions is a possibility at this point. There's too many variables, and it is a wait and see as we go through the next several days, because I can tell you, these kind of solutions, they're going to flip-flop, they're going to change continuously over the next several days. So anything that you see out there saying this long-range forecast, that this is going to happen, you just can't focus in on one computer model. We have to kind of wait and see how all the different variables start to come together, and we will keep you posted on that right here on MyFoxHurricane.com.